One of you give me the thumbs up and say I've got the right screen on. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so as Natalie's just explained, it remains an absolute duty to organise for provision in a child's EHC plan, which will require creative means, and of course we're going to drive this through the best way that we possibly can. Perhaps by exploring online delivery via FaceTime, Skype, Hangout, Zooms, or whatever platform your school has agreed to, and maybe by outsourcing to a team that's already experienced in working remotely. As SENCOs, we have to coordinate that provision in the best way that we can, but if you are struggling to make it work, then talk to your local authority so that alternatives can be explored. There is an expectation that we are going to look at the local offer just the same as usual, and that we will assist the local authority as much as possible in trying to secure provisions, and that's nothing new, it's what we're used to doing. In the event something can't be secured, and if a parent agrees to a reduction in the provision for the interim period, they're not agreeing to a change in the EHCP. So it's okay to say for a couple of weeks, oh, well, you know, we can't do that physiotherapy for 2 or 3 weeks. That's okay, as long as we can have it back as soon as is reasonably practical. We're really used to delivering things in schools, and it might not be obvious, but we do need to make sure we're keeping clear records on that as well, so that we've got that for the future. There we go. So what does this actually mean for the SENCO? Well, basically, I'm sorry, but it's business as usual. And 2 questions that I keep picking up on social media are: who has responsibility for the children with EHC plans during the school closure, and who makes the decisions about children and TAs? And the answer is, who did it before? Because that actually hasn't changed. We haven't changed our job descriptions, we haven't changed the law or the Children's and Families Act or the Code of Practice or anything like that. It still actually remains the same. We've just got to be as creative as possible in trying to make those things work. And I know that's easier said than done, I really do. In a primary school, we recognise that quite a lot of the support was almost on the hoof. You've got a TA at the side of the child and they would adjust things as they went along, and sometimes they can't do that, and we can't do that now via an online platform. That's not easy, but we can look at what the plan is for delivering that lesson, and we can make suggestions, and perhaps the TA can hop onto a video share if necessary with them. It isn't that the role of the SENCO has actually changed, but the way that we carry out that role has. So, as Natalie said, we still have to meet statutory deadlines or negotiate a reasonable extension. We're still responsible for the conduit of information between education, external professionals and parents, and we're still responsible for making sure the records of SEN pupils are kept up to date. We know that the local authority is responsible for the provision of Section F in the EHCP, but until we get that notice from the Secretary of State, it remains an absolute legal duty to actually try and make as much of it happen as absolutely possible, rather than this reasonable endeavours. And this, in many ways, even more than we used to before, is that we have to look out of the box for solutions. So, we recognise that a lot of SENCOs are still classroom teachers and having to design and deliver a curriculum online to your students alongside juggling your own children that might be at home and everything else that you need to do. Others might be involved in on-site delivery for the children of critical workers and those who fall under the banner of vulnerable. But quite a lot are saying, not so much what do I do with my time, but how can I make the best use of my time? And there are a few key things that you could perhaps consider over this time period, if you like, all of which encompass the Code of Practice 6.90. So the first thing is overseeing the day-to-day operation of the school's SEN policy, and that might involve reviewing your policies, your accessibility plans, perhaps redeveloping your SEN information report to reflect any changes in your SEN provision during the school closure. So I know a lot of schools have started to add just a paragraph on the end that says this is what we're now doing differently during the closures. And we're going to look at SEN information reports in a little bit more detail in the 4th of these webinar series. We are responsible for coordinating the provision for children with SEN. So as mentioned on previous slides, this is a bit of creative thinking and sourcing alternatives. Some schools are having the TAs record the sessions demonstrating lesson content so that they can be watched over and over by the students, and others are sourcing online provision from companies that are used to doing it. So whether that's online software or a company that's used to working remotely with students. It's, again, really important that we keep a record of that, so provision mapping for it, because you'll be surprised how many things you put in place and then forget them promptly because something else comes along and takes our attention. You know that from normal daily practice, but now it's even more so. And we've got some more ideas around the things that you can do for provisions of children with SEN in session 2 of the webinar series. I think I'm doing an advert for the rest of the series, by the way. We advise on the deployment of the delegated budget and other resources, and this is a really good point to talk about furloughing of TAs. And Natalie made it very clear we're not legal advisors, but we asked around some information on this. And in a nutshell, we shouldn't be furloughing TAs. The school's exceptional funding guidance that was released on 7th of April and the update on 17th of April made it clear that if the money is coming from the public purse, then we shouldn't be putting those staff on furlough if their wages are paid from that money. If you have a private income coming in, for example, a breakfast club or something, where those members of staff are paid for from that money and that money has dried up, that would be a reasonable reason to put them on a furlough. However, being paid from the public purse shouldn't be. And the same applies in independent schools. So where they have children who are placed there by the local authority because they're looked after or they are being funded through their EHCP, then those independent schools are expected to maintain that support for those students because that's coming from the public purse. And I do apologise, it is specific information to England, but we do seem to have more of that coming out. In addition, during this time, we might be looking at CPD opportunities. You're on one today for yourself or for the staff in your schools. And we've got some more information on that in the 3rd webinar. And this is the ideal time to start looking at your budget for the forthcoming year and plan as far as is possible what you want to put in place. So some schools are looking towards the continued remote learning when we go back, the increased use of technology and providing counselling services, because we understand that a lot of students are going to struggle when we return back to schools. It goes without saying that maintaining contact with families is essential. The SENCO may well delegate this to TAs, form tutors, class teachers, but they need to be kept in the loop. And some families might need just a light touch to reassure them that they've not been forgotten, whereas others are going to need their hands holding and a bit more of a regular, nurturing, supportive chat. And I'm going to say to you, another advert, come back to session number 2. I remember being SENCO in the classroom and bemoaning the fact that I rarely had time to liaise with my external agencies. And just like you, they're probably working from home at the moment. And without the need to travel between different settings and sitting in clinics, they possibly have a little bit more time to sit and discuss things with you, either a telephone call, a video call, or even responding to emails. So don't be afraid to make plans for the future, even if you can't give that future a date. For some of our pupils, they're stuck in this transitional period between schools, let's say year 6 to year 7, and the external agencies we work with might be the only familiar face that they have when they return to whichever establishment that is. So that does depend when we return, of course. My local primary schools are in regular contact with their secondary SENCO. They've already hosted shared video sessions with 4 or 5 children that are all going to attend the same secondary school, and they've got the 2 respective SENCOs on a video chat, their current class teacher, a couple of the secondary class teachers, and a couple of those children. They've all had a nice little chat together. And on the other side of that, another school I know of has had a virtual coffee morning with the parents of SEN pupils so that they could talk to the secondary SENCO and find out a little bit about how their child's going to be supported. Whilst it might be that we actually return to our normal status and we all go back to our normal year groups for whatever period of time, it's really important that we kind of start planning for what happens if that doesn't happen, if you like, so planning for the future. The other thing I always used to have a good whinge about was trying to stay on top of all of my records for SEN pupils, and fortunately I had a really good electronic online plans and provision mapping programme that allowed me to access files and information from home, so to that I have to say thank you to Edukey. And in a circumstance such as this, I would not have been able to access my paper-based materials or my school MIS, but I could have got on with updating my information, my records for my students, and sharing that information with my colleagues. It's essential that when we return to what is relative normality, we're not scrabbling around trying to pull everything together that's been happening over the last few months. EHCPs, as both Natalie and I have said, are still statutory, and therefore the records around them have to be maintained, but we shouldn't forget those children who are SEN support, for whom we might need the information in the future to demonstrate the level of their ongoing needs. Annual reviews still need to take place, but the duty to undertake them under Section 44 says that the timeline could be disapplied in the case of a temporary continuity order, but there hasn't been one released. And we could suspend or postpone them, but that again is not guaranteed. You need to work with your local authority around being creative in the manner under which you take those annual reviews. And Natalie has mentioned that already. NASON have done some case studies on this, and they have indicated that more professionals than usual are actually able to attend using online methods. Again, because they're not having to travel to clinics or to other settings, so they've got a bit more time to sit down and attend. But without a review, any provision that is in the EHCP does remain intact until such time as the review takes place. And I would advise any SENCO at this point in time, faced with an imminent review, talk to your local authority and find out what their stance is and exactly what they are expecting from you. The Equalities Act, oops, I changed my slide. The Equalities Act 2010 is still in place, and as SENCOs, it's our duty alongside the head teacher to ensure it's being adhered to. This might ensure ensuring students can access their reasonable adjustments at home. They may well have normally accessed something in class, for example, coloured overlays, specialised exercise books, assistive technology, and they might not have a copy of those things at home. So making sure that they've got those. Lots of schools have raided their classroom stocks of iPads and PCs to give those students who are Pupil Premium perhaps didn't have them, but we mustn't forget our SEN pupils who would normally have made use of that technology. And don't forget again to add that to your provision map. Whilst your school governors or trustees might not be meeting as regularly, it's important that they know what's going on as well. So with my governor's hat on, I'd love an email from my SENCO to say what barriers they're facing or what hurdles they've overcome, so that I can provide appropriate support and challenge to the leadership team. Again, just like external professionals, now is a really good opportunity to build a relationship with your SEN governor. And then finally, we need to take time to reflect on things so that we can plan for the future effectively, whether that's identifying opportunities for CPD or running a self-evaluation of yourself, your team, your department or your school, and then using that information to plan strategically for the autumn term and beyond. For some schools, some of these key responsibilities over the last few slides will be more of a priority than others will be. And I'm going to hand over to David.
Wow, what a first session. It's been truly amazing. Great speakers, great guests here in attendance as well.